He steamrolled the tournament, submitting or outscoring every single opponent. He choked his final adversary completely unconscious to win a world title. But what happened in the seconds after the match is what got him banned from the world's biggest jiu-jitsu federation for 5 long years. At the 2024 IBJJF NOGI World Championships, we witnessed a moment that went way beyond the final score. A moment of domination, a shocking upset, and absolute chaos, all in about 5 minutes. This is the story of how wrestling phenom Pat Downey picked a fight with the IBJJF and the fiery accusations he fired back. Was this a clear case of unsportsmanlike conduct that deserved a severe punishment? Or did the IBJJF use this as a golden opportunity to silence a controversial outsider and make an example of him? We investigated the whole story, from the choke to the ban to the bitter war of words that has split the grappling community right down the middle. To understand the firestorm that erupted in December 2024, you first have to understand the guy who lit the match. Pat Downey is not your typical jiu-jitsu competitor. He's a wrestler first and foremost, and one of the highest caliber. An NCAA Division I All-American, a junior world silver medalist, and a US Open national champion who represented Team USA. His talent is undeniable. Even his biggest critics will give him that. He's got a rare mix of explosive power, technical genius, and an almost supernatural feel for grappling. But that talent has always come with a rebellious streak. Downey's career is a highlight reel of incredible wins, punctuated by clashes with authority. He was dismissed from collegiate wrestling programs for repeated violations of team rules, a detail his detractors love to bring up as proof of a pattern. His supporters, though, see an independent spirit, a lone warrior, in a sport that demands conformity. Downey has always been outspoken, using social media to call out anyone he felt was falling short. For better or worse, he's authentic to a fault, which makes him both a fan favorite and a lightning rod for controversy. So when this established bad boy of wrestling announced he was pivoting to submission grappling full-time, the community took notice. He wasn't just dipping his toes in, he was diving in headfirst with a characteristically bold declaration. He had a vision to become the fastest promoted BJJ black belt ever. This wasn't just ambition, it was a challenge to a martial art steeped in tradition and a strict belt system. He was an outsider, not just by discipline, but by attitude. And he was walking into the house of the most powerful and traditional organization of all, the International Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Federation. A force of nature was on a collision course with an immovable object. The only question was when the impact would happen, not if. That collision course between the force of nature and the immovable object arrived at the 2024 IBJJF NOGI World Championship. This was supposed to be Downey's showcase, his first major IBJJF tournament as a blue belt, and he was competing in the super heavyweight division. Despite his low rank in the jiu-jitsu world, his reputation preceded him. Everyone knew about the wrestler, everyone knew about the raw power and the relentless pressure he brought. Still, the IBJJF NOGI Worlds is the pinnacle of the sport. Surely someone would test him, but they didn't. He wasn't just winning, he was annihilating. The tournament became the Pat Downey show. One by one, his opponents were dispatched. The official record shows he went 5-0, but that simple stat doesn't capture the sheer dominance. Multiple reports state he conceded 0 points throughout the entire tournament. Think about that for a second. In the biggest no-gi tournament on the planet, a guy who had only recently dedicated himself to the sport wasn't even scored on. He was imposing his will in a grappler's world. His matches weren't just wins, they were statements. He used his signature front headlock series, a wrestling staple, to control and suffocate his opponents, racking up submission after submission. His path to the final was so dominant that a buzz started building in the arena. People were gathering to watch the wrestler. He was proving his point, that his brand of grappling could not only hang with the jiu-jitsu elite, but could dominate them. By the time he stepped onto the mat for the final, the narrative was already written. He was the outsider who had crashed the party. His opponent was a formidable Russian competitor, Shamil Murtazaliev, a tough and respected grappler. But on this day, it felt like he was just the last man standing in the path of the inevitable. The stage was set for a coronation. Instead, it became the scene of a brawl and a career-altering controversy. The final match began, and for a few minutes, it looked like the coronation was proceeding exactly as planned. Downey was a relentless force of pressure. He stalked Murtazaliev across the mat, giving him no space to set up his own game. The match ended with what had become Downey's signature move of the tournament, a crushing head and arm choke. He locked it in, squeezed, and the result was decisive. Shamil Murtazaliev went completely unconscious. The referee stopped the fight. Pat Downey was the IBJJF NOGI world champion. In that moment of triumph, Downey stood up. And this is where the two versions of this story violently split. In the seconds after his victory, Downey made a gesture. He raised his hand and drew his thumb across his throat, the classic throat slit gesture. To Pat Downey, this was just a celebration. He'd later claim he was copying what he'd seen Brazilian champions do without consequence. He said, "All I'm doing is emulating the gesture I've seen done at your federation, that you've never penalized. I've never seen them penalize a Brazilian for doing this gesture." But Murtazaliev's coaches and teammates, watching their fighter unconscious on the mat, saw it as profound disrespect. They started shouting at Downey. Never one to back down, Downey gestured and shouted back, reportedly yelling something like, "I just put you to sleep." As this was happening, Murtazaliev began to regain consciousness. He woke up not to a respectful handshake, but to chaos. His opponent in a shouting match with his corner. Disoriented and furious, he got to his feet. Words were exchanged, and then it turned physical. Reports indicate Murtazaliev threw a punch and Downey retaliated. For a few shocking moments, a fistfight broke out on the mats of the World Championship. Coaches and officials rushed in to separate them as the crowd watched in disbelief. The scene was ugly and chaotic. Downey had his victory, but in those few moments of rage, he had lost something much more valuable. In the immediate aftermath of that chaotic brawl, the consequences came down swiftly and decisively. The IBJJF disqualified both Pat Downey and Shamil Murtazaliev. There would be no gold medalist in the blue belt super heavyweight division. Downey, who had just submitted every opponent he faced, was stripped of the title he had so decisively won. But the disqualification was only the beginning. The grappling world waited to see what the Federation's final ruling would be. For 3 months, speculation swirled online. Then, on March 3, 2025, the hammer dropped. The IBJJF issued a formal suspension letter to Pat Downey. It wasn't for 1 or 2 years. It was a 5-year ban from all IBJJF competition, effective from the date of the incident until December 12, 2029. This wasn't a slap on the wrist. It was practically a career-ending sentence within the Federation. The letter cited the rulebook for acts of physical or verbal aggression, damage, or non-compliance. Crucially, it also listed inciting violence as an aggravating factor, which could increase the penalty. The Federation's message was clear. They held Downey primarily responsible for creating the environment that led to the fight. To add fuel to the fire, the punishment for his opponent was revealed to be much lighter. Reports indicated that Shamil Murtazaliev, the man many agree threw the first punch, received a 2-year ban. The disparity was glaring. 5 years for Downey, 2 for Murtazaliev. For Downey's supporters, this was the smoking gun, proof that the punishment was never just about the brawl. In their view, the IBJJF had just made their case for them. If the IBJJF thought their verdict was the end of the story, they fundamentally misjudged the man. Pat Downey did not take the 5-year ban lying down. He came out swinging, launching a blistering counterattack on social media and in interviews that went straight for the Federation's integrity. His central claim was that he was a victim of a biased system that protects its own and punishes outsiders. He pointed directly at what he saw as a pro-Brazilian bias, stating with raw frustration, "Here's how racist the IBJJF is." Where did I learn this from? so many Brazilians after they submit the opponent. He argued the throat slit gesture was common, and the only reason it was an issue was because he, an American outsider, a gringo as he put it, was the one doing it. He went further, dismissing the federation with open contempt, famously calling the IBJJF a goofy, wet chicken nugget promotion on social media. His message was one of complete defiance. He declared he would never compete for the IBJJF again, framing their decision not as a loss for him, but as a loss for them. "I promise this is the last time this federation will ever get to profit off of my performance," he stated publicly. This wasn't a new line of criticism from Downey. Even before the tournament, he had been a vocal critic of the IBJJF's judging and scoring systems, calling for more public and objective criteria. In his narrative, the brawl wasn't the real reason for the ban, it was a pretext. He believed the IBJJF saw an opportunity. The combination of his celebration and the ensuing fight gave them the perfect excuse to remove a loud, inconvenient, and dominant outsider who threatened their status quo. To Downey, this wasn't about sportsmanship. It was a targeted hit. While Downey waged his war in the court of public opinion, the IBJJF's case was built on the black and white text of its own rulebook. So, putting the passionate arguments aside for a moment, what do the regulations actually say? Is there a case to be made for the Federation's decision? The IBJJF's regulations are extensive and strict. Article 6.1 of the rulebook covers serious fouls, including gestures meant to ridicule an opponent. The throat slit gesture, while not named, could easily fall under this clause, giving them grounds for the disqualification. The more severe punishment, however, comes from the rules on acts of physical or verbal aggression. Striking an opponent is a massive violation. The letter to Downey specifically mentioned this, plus the aggravating factor of inciting violence. This is where it gets tricky. The IBJJF's position seems to be that Downey's celebration and taunts were the spark that ignited the physical fight, making him more responsible than the man who threw the first punch. From an organizational standpoint, one could argue that the winner has a higher duty to de-escalate, not escalate, a tense situation. But this brings us back to the core of Downey's argument: consistency. The accusation of a pro-Brazilian bias within the IBJJF is not new. It's a sore spot that has simmered in the non-Brazilian grappling community for years. Athletes and fans have long complained about perceived inconsistencies in calls and disciplinary actions, suggesting that some athletes get the benefit of the doubt. While hard data is tough to find, the perception is powerful. Many point to past incidents where other athletes were aggressive or disrespectful and received far lighter punishments, if any at all. The IBJJF hasn't publicly addressed these specific allegations of bias. Their stance, as reflected in their letter to Downey, was one of hoping he can keep competing with determination while ensuring that your behavior remains respectful and non-aggressive. From their perspective, they were enforcing their rules to protect the integrity of their events. But the question that remains is whether that enforcement is applied equally to everyone. After digging through the accusations, the rulebook, and the raw emotion of the incident, we're left with two clear and conflicting narratives. So, where does the truth actually lie? As with most things, it really depends on how you look at it. The first is the story of necessary discipline. In this version, Pat Downey, an athlete with a history of clashing with authority, entered the IBJJF's world and refused to play by their rules. He performed a provocative gesture over an unconscious opponent, taunted his corner, and brawled on the mat. As the sport's largest governing body had to act decisively, they followed their rulebook and handed down a severe punishment to send a message: this behavior will not be tolerated. The 5-year ban, while harsh, was a direct consequence of his own actions. The second narrative is the story of a targeted takedown. In this version, Pat Downey was an outsider who was too good and too loud for the establishment. He was already a critic of the Federation. When he tore through their world championship, he became a threat. This narrative argues the IBJJF used the post-match chaos as a convenient excuse. They seized on a celebration they've ignored from others and a fight he didn't start to levy an unprecedentedly long suspension, effectively eliminating a problematic competitor. The ban wasn't about a gesture or a punch, it was about power, control, and silencing a dissenter. Was the 5-year ban a fair punishment, or was it a hit job on a controversial figure the establishment wanted gone? Was Pat Downey a reckless aggressor who got what he deserved, or was he a marked man from the start? We want to know what you think. Head down to the comments and let us know your verdict. Was the 5-year ban justified, or was it an abuse of power?